It's that time of the year again. A new season is here with a ton of changes, and you already know that solo queue is going to be completely unbalanced and pure chaos as everyone is learning how to play around all of the new mechanics. And so I'm here to save you some of that stress. I'm going to be breaking down how all of the changes are going to affect the meta, the mistakes you absolutely need to avoid making, and how to easily punish players who don't understand how to play the new map. So first, let's start with a brief overview of how the game overall is going to be changing from Season 15 to 16. You guys know how there was this sense of dread when the enemy team was picking up all of the permanent passive buffs, like they got feats, they got Autocon, they're getting all of the flowers too, meanwhile your team only has 10 somehow. Season 15 just felt very stressful, even if you were individually doing well. If your entire team was losing every permanent buff, it just felt like you were going to lose regardless of how well you individually did. So it was often correct to not even play for yourself and just randomly group up and fight with your team over random stuff. You could even see this if you watched pro games. It just felt like teams at some point would go, well, let's just brute force this third kill no matter what, and hard force this objective for feats too. Season 16 will absolutely not be like this whatsoever. Teamwork is obviously important and always will be, but there is a lot more individual power and agency for every role. Even if your entire team is losing, the game is still going to be hard, of course, but it won't feel unwinnable versus a bunch of objective buffs your opponents picked up early. So compared to Season 15, you shouldn't feel the need to save your teammates or run around contesting every objective. You individually doing well will matter way more this time around, and there's also quite a few game mechanics that will punish you if you group up too much. In this season, you should be playing side lanes way more, and you'll be adopting a more hit and run, constantly rotating around the map type of macro rather than just grouping and team fighting 24/7. So now let's break down some mechanics you need to know to understand why that's the case. First is the way that towers have changed. As you may know, turret plates last the entire game now and are on every tower, and there's also the overgrowth mechanic. You know how throughout League's history, turrets just feel like paper once you've got 2 or 3 items and you just start one-shotting them? This is far less likely to happen in Season 16. All towers now have the turret plating mechanic, which causes them to grow tankier for a while as you take plates, and if there's allies around you as you take the plates, they get even tankier. Combined with the overgrowth burst mechanic, this means that you will deal a lot of damage to towers immediately, but your damage will slow down after that. This is the first major mistake you want to avoid. Do not get baited to try and just sit there hitting towers like you used to. Normally this tower would have gone down way faster to a Diana, right? Unless you're completely free to push, it is super unlikely you're going to take an entire tower in one go, and you're probably going to be collapsed on. Because of these two mechanics, it's often going to be best to hit a tower, get a few plates with the overgrowth burst, and then come back once the bonus armor and magic resist has fallen off. And that's what I mean by that hit and run playstyle that you'll be turning to. You ideally want to hit a tower, then go do something else, then you come back later once overgrowth has regrown on it to hit it again, and then repeat the process over and over. Overgrowth is definitely one of the main mechanics of this season, and it's going to be fun for at least 3 months until I do get bored and annoyed with it. I do think it's a cool way to incentivize pushing, but it's also extremely misleading with its actual visuals, and this is something I don't want all of you to get baited by. You would think that when a tower is fully loaded with the stuff, that your next auto is going to completely pop it and deal an absurd amount of damage to that tower. This is absolutely not the case. Over half of the damage charged up is ready immediately when there's barely any overgrowth on the tower. It doesn't really stack that much more damage to just let it sit there and pile up. Basically, do not make macro decisions around this. Don't be like, this bot lane tower has a ton of overgrowth on it, but this top lane one doesn't. I guess I have to go bot lane. You absolutely do not want to do that. Just play normally and just hit any tower that has any buildup on it at all. Also, if you've been winning the whole game and your own towers have a bunch of overgrowth on them, don't feel like you need to just sit there defending them. Trust me, this is a really bait visual. I've seen players literally int to proc a tower with a ton of buildup, thinking it matters, but it really doesn't. Moving on, overgrowth and turret plates are not the only reason that macro is going to be changing. There's also minion adjustments you want to get better at playing around. The biggest change is that waves will now spawn more often. This means that you have even less time than before to end a play. This concept is already one of the biggest macro problems that most low elo players face. Most of you should know by now about side lane rotations. You push a side lane wave, then you rotate to join your team for a bit to fight or secure something, and then you go back to the side lane. What most players actually struggle with is not knowing when that play is over. Typically, I will just see players linger with their team a little too long, not confident to just leave them again in case they just randomly die or something, right? This is going to be even worse to do now. Because waves are spawning faster, this technically means that you have even less time to stay grouped up before you need to go back to the side lane again. You absolutely want to avoid this mistake, but also punish it as well. Because those waves are spawning more often and minions also walk a little bit faster, it means that there's always going to be some minions you can play around in a side lane. So if you sneak back to the side while your opponent is still randomly grouped or away somewhere else, you will almost always have an opportunity to fast push a wave and get some plates thanks to the overgrowth on towers. Like I've said, a very hit and run type of playstyle that will heavily reward players who actually move around the map constantly rather than just staying grouped 24/7. Minions spawning faster also impacts your decision on whether you should destroy enemy inhibitors or not. Taking an inhib has always been a bit of a double-edged sword. If you take it, you will put pressure on the map, forcing your opponents to defend. But at the same time, because waves are always pushing into your opponent's base, your team would often be losing an entire lane's worth of farm. So unless you're actually doing something with the pressure, you'd actually throw your lead by taking inhibitors. In Season 16, it's just going to be a sharper double-edged sword. Because waves are spawning faster, that means more super minions pushing into the enemy base, which is of course more pressure. But this also means waves are just going to push even more aggressively into the enemy base, so you're likely to miss out on even more farm. Basically, just be a little bit more careful in Season 16 when destroying an enemy inhibitor. You will have a lot more pressure in that lane, but you're going to be losing a lot more farm. Another new change you need to think twice about utilizing are the new Fae Lights. As you guys likely already know, you get a huge amount of vision by simply placing your ward in the designated area. And let me tell you, low elo players will always ward these areas. It was very obvious whenever I had sweeper and I was clearing vision. Oh man, I wonder where I should check for enemy wards. Oh gosh, I wonder where they place them. Fae Lights are absolutely useful, but I think most low elo players will just be super lazy and always put their wards there. And if you do, it just makes it super easy to clear your vision reliably. Remember, a lot of value of vision can sometimes come from your opponents and not knowing that they're spotted. Like wasting an enemy jungler's time baiting that they can gank you is a super useful strategy. Basically, you just need to switch up your vision every now and then. Don't always ward Fae Lights, especially because deep vision like this is always going to be useful. Understanding how to get those little advantages through vision is obviously an extremely important skill. And with all of the old set in stone timers changing because minions are now going to be spawning earlier and Fae Lights are being added and so on, vision has changed quite a bit. That's why we had challenger support mains spam the new patch to learn every detail for how vision is changing in Season 16. We've got a brand new vision course that will teach you every single new timer and every other vision control fundamental you need to know to get ahead of the curve. So if you want to skip all of the January usual clickbait of all the content creators playing catch up and trying to figure out the new patch, then make sure to subscribe to SkillCapped to get hundreds of hours of playtesting, gathering information on the new patch, all in one super useful course. And of course, you also get access to all of our other fundamental courses, which are all backed by our 5-division rank up guarantee while actively using our platform. Use the discount link below if you want to sign up. Speaking of vision, with Fae Lights being added, along with home guards being buffed, this might make way for a new type of rotation. Remember how we discussed earlier how typical macro is to push a side lane wave and then rotate to your team? Well, because there will be much more random vision, especially around the river, they're likely going to spot your rotations. So you may want to avoid the typical path through the enemy jungle when rotating towards your team. Instead, you can abuse the fact that Riot buffed home guards to let players back into the action faster. So for example, let's take a standard roam from pushing bot and then rotating towards the Barrier area. It takes about 20 seconds to go all the way from bot, potentially getting spotted by Fae Lights, and then to the objective fight. On the other hand, let's say you push, then you recall instead. It will take about 20-ish seconds to get to your tier 1 mid tower, and then an extra 5 seconds or so after that to get to the Barrier area, so 25 seconds in total. While that is a slightly slower rotation, it does allow you to dodge vision, buy items, or regroup a bit easier while still being nearly just as fast. As always, it just depends on the game's circumstances, but you should definitely be using this type of rotation more often in Season 16. Just keep in mind that you have to walk through the lanes to keep home guards. If you walk into the jungle, you will lose them, making your rotation slower at a base. The role that can take advantage of this the most is probably probably mid lane as long as you don't make the mistake of wasting your new empowered recall. When you complete your quest, you get a quick recall similar to the Baron empowered one, but on a fairly long cooldown. The mistake you want to avoid as a mid laner is wasting this recall when you don't need to, and that's because this type of effect is extremely OP if used properly. For example, do you guys remember when Symbiotic Souls were first introduced to League? You got the recall immediately upon buying them, and within a few months, once people realized how good they were, 50% of mid lane champions were rushing them every game, and so Riot gutted them. And still, despite being absurdly nerfed, only giving the recall once fully stacked, certain champions were still abusing them, and so they've finally been removed from the game. This type of effect for free is insane. For example, as I take this tier 2 tower, Riven comes out of base. Normally, she could chase me down the lane and make me recall all the way back at my tower, costing me so much tempo. Instead, I can randomly recall in her face, saving me a ton of time. Or later into the game, as I'm pushing side lane, I notice Riven is coming towards me, but I can overstay and get even more plates because I always have a get out of jail free card in my back pocket. This mid quest reward is so good in a hit and run type of meta that this season is going to be. Even if it just lets you push out one extra wave, that is more than good enough value. So just don't make the mistake of wasting this cooldown. Make sure you're actually tracking it on your bars, and then you should just try to base slightly before it's up so you will actually have the cooldown available to let you play the map more aggressively like we just saw. You're not always going to be able to do this, you're very often going to waste the recall, but if you can save it, abusing this free 4-second base will make you a much better mid laner. And this brings me to the final mistake I want all 5 roles to avoid in this season. Do not tunnel vision on finishing your quests. The quest rewards are absolutely useful, and you do want to finish them in a timely manner, but do not troll yourself just to finish them quicker. You should keep roaming to other lanes, help your jungler, don't overstay in lane to try and get more stacks. There's going to be so many guides and shorts, I know because we're going to be making some of them, that will tell you that if you do this and that, you're going to get your quest done 2 minutes earlier than everyone else. Getting your quest done early changes almost nothing. Just don't think about it and play normally. That's it. Just don't get baited. Anyway, those are all of the mistakes you're going to want to avoid in this new patch. Remember, SkillCapped is the best place to learn how to improve, so use that discount link below to sign up. See you next time.